A nun, a convent, a body found floating in a well. No screams, no witnesses. No justice, for 28 long years. Was it suicide? A crime of passion? Or a cover-up so powerful it reached into the church itself? This is not just a murder story. This is the story of silence, manufactured, manipulated, and enforced. Welcome to the Crime Vault. Today, we reopen one of India's most mysterious and longest-running murder cases, the Sister Abhaya case. She was born as Beena Thomas on March 26, 1973, in Kottayam, Kerala, a place where the sound of prayer and the rustle of palm leaves echo with equal serenity. Beena was like many other girls in Kerala, quiet, religious, intelligent. But from a young age, she was different. Her dream wasn't of marriage or a career. It was of devotion, of surrender, to God. At just 17, she entered the Nanaya Catholic convent and took the name Sister Abhaya. She was a second-year pre-degree student at KE College, Changanassery. Every morning, she would rise before dawn, pray, study, attend classes, and return to her small room in the St. Pius X convent, Kottayam. A routine life. A quiet soul. But in silence, evil lurked. March 27, 1992. Sister Abhaya woke up early, just like every other day. She stepped out of her room around 4 a.m., most likely to get a drink of water from the convent kitchen. The corridors of the convent were cold and dim. Most of the nuns were still asleep. But that day, someone else was awake. According to the official convent version, she never came back. Around 7 a.m., the nuns realized that Abhaya was missing. A search began, first inside the convent, then outside. At 8:30 a.m., the gardener discovered something horrifying. A lifeless body floating in the well inside the convent premises. It was Sister Abhaya. Her body, dressed in a nightgown, bobbed in the water, still, pale, and dead. Panic spread through the convent. Police were called. But what followed next was a story of lies, silence, and manipulation. The Kottayam West Police arrived at the scene. Their report was quick and suspiciously simple. Verdict: suicide. They claimed she jumped into the well due to stress or depression. Case closed. But several things didn't add up. No suicide note. Her slippers were found neatly placed outside the kitchen. Why would someone about to die care to keep them there? There were injury marks on her body, especially on her head, deep blunt injuries that didn't match a simple fall. Despite this, the police stuck to the suicide theory. But whispers had begun. The first post-mortem, conducted at Kottayam Medical College, was vague. But one line stood out. Lacerated wounds and abrasions on the head. Why would a person jumping into a well at dawn have head injuries before entering the water? The convent officials, meanwhile, remained eerily silent. Sister Abhaya's body was buried hastily, without a proper funeral, without informing her parents in time. Her father, Thomas, was devastated. But confused. Why would his daughter, so full of faith, kill herself? But the system had already begun its slow descent into darkness. The case was passed to the crime branch, and later, the CBI. But with every transfer, the truth grew more distorted. As months passed, the case became just another unsolved mystery. But not for everyone. One voice refused to be silenced: Sister Jesam, a nun who would later leave the church and publish a tell-all book. She hinted at the rot inside the convent walls: abuse, secrecy, and silence. Meanwhile, public pressure mounted. Human rights groups, journalists, and activists began asking tough questions. Why was the post-mortem inconclusive? Why did the police fail to secure the scene? Why was evidence tampered with? The answer, many believed, lay within the church, a powerful institution that had every reason to protect its own. But in 1993, just a year later, a bombshell was about to explode. A local crime magazine published an investigative story suggesting that Sister Abhaya had caught 2 priests and a nun in a compromising situation, and that was the real reason she was silenced. The article named names: Father Thomas Cotter, Father Jose Puthrakale, and Sister Sephi. And just like that, the case was no longer about a suicide. It was about murder. But even as suspicions grew and whispers turned to outcry, justice remained out of reach. The killers were walking free. The evidence was crumbling. And Sister Abhaya's soul was still waiting for truth. In a world where justice moves slowly, and power silences truth, one case dared to survive, for 28 long years. A murdered nun. A convent in denial. And a system built to bury secrets. This is the Crime Vault, and you're watching part 2 of the Sister Abhaya murder case. 1993, with the public breathing down their necks, the Kerala government finally gave in. The case was handed over to the Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI. Everyone expected the truth to explode. Instead, it fizzled. The first CBI team couldn't find conclusive evidence of murder. They closed the case, calling it death due to unknown reasons. Unknown reasons? A 19-year-old girl with head injuries found in a well, and they couldn't figure out how. The report was rejected. People were furious. Activists alleged that the CBI had been pressured, possibly by the church, to keep it vague. So, a second CBI team took over. This time, they meant business. 2007, the CBI took a bold step. They conducted narcoanalysis tests, controversial, but revealing. The suspects? Father Thomas Cotter, then vice principal of the college where Abhaya studied. Father Jose Puthrakale, a senior priest. Sister Sephi, a nun living in the same convent. Under the influence of truth serum, they began talking. And what came out was horrifying. Abhaya saw us together, we were in the kitchen, she screamed, she had to be silenced. It was as if a dark secret had been cracked open. According to the CBI, Sister Abhaya walked into the kitchen early that morning and witnessed the 3 in an intimate act. In a panic, fearing exposure, they hit her on the head with a blunt object, possibly an axe handle, and threw her body into the convent well to make it look like suicide. A young nun, killed because she saw something she shouldn't have. But there was a catch. The narco tests were not admissible as primary evidence in court. Still, they gave the case the momentum it desperately needed. What followed was a battle, not just in courtrooms, but in society. Supporters of the accused priests and nun claimed innocence. They called the narco tests manipulated. They said it was character assassination. That the church was being unfairly targeted. But the evidence against them was growing. Their presence inside the convent at odd hours. A deliberate attempt to erase CCTV footage from nearby shops. Testimonies from former CBI officers alleging internal sabotage during the early phase of investigation. One officer even claimed that important files were stolen from his desk, right inside CBI headquarters. And then came the twist that shook even the investigators. The crime scene had been tampered with. The kitchen walls had been scrubbed clean. Blood stains were painted over. And, most shocking of all, the original case diary from 1992 had vanished. This wasn't just a botched investigation. It was a calculated cover-up. And yet, somehow, the case stayed alive. By 2008, the CBI arrested all 3 accused, Father Thomas Cotter, Father Jose Puthrakale, and Sister Sephi. India erupted. TV channels aired old footage of the convent well. Newspapers carried images of Abhaya's smiling face, next to headlines that screamed, "Nuns in murder," and "Priests behind bars." The church issued a cautious statement. The accused maintained their innocence. The public waited. But justice was still far away. In 2009, Father Jose was released for lack of evidence. Later, Sister Sephi and Father Kador were also granted bail. Witnesses began turning hostile. One key eyewitness, a servant named Raju, went missing. Others changed their statements under pressure. The case once again began to lose steam. It was like watching a candle burn out, slowly, painfully, while the shadows around it danced freely. Years passed. Governments changed. Public interest faded. But somewhere in Kottayam, a family still waited. Sister Abhaya's parents, now old, frail, held on to a single photo of their daughter and a single hope. That one day, someone would say what they always knew. She did not kill herself. She was murdered. It would take 11 more years for the trial to even begin. From 1992 to 2019, the case crawled. Legal delays. Petitions. Missing witnesses. Torn evidence. Some even called it a judicial joke. But those who still believed in Sister Abhaya, activists, former CBI officers, independent journalists, refused to let the fire die. In 2019, the CBI Special Court in Tiruvananthapuram finally framed formal charges of murder and destruction of evidence against Father Thomas Kador and Sister Sephi. The trial began. The courtrooms were packed. The press returned. And for the first time in decades, the shadow of truth began to rise. Justice is like the well in which Sister Abhaya was found, deep, dark, and silent. But sometimes, even in the stillest water, the truth refuses to drown. Sometimes, truth takes decades to speak. Sometimes, the dead must wait years before their silence is heard. And sometimes, justice does arrive, late, slow, but unstoppable. This is the Crime Vault, and you're watching the final chapter in the haunting saga of the Sister Abhaya case. The courtroom at CBI Special Court, Tiruvananthapuram, buzzed with anticipation. It had taken 27 long years to get here. The air was thick with tension. For the first time, Father Thomas Kador and Sister Sephi stood as accused, facing full murder charges under Section 302 of the IPC. The third suspect, Father Jose Puthrakale, had already been discharged due to lack of evidence. He walked free. But the courtroom still held the weight of decades of pain, silence, and betrayal. The prosecution came armed with whatever pieces of the puzzle they could gather. Narcoanalysis recordings. Conflicting statements from the accused. Forensic traces of blood on Sister Sephi's clothes. Tampered evidence, painted walls, destroyed diary, washed kitchen. And above all, a motive. They argued that Sister Abhaya walked in on an illicit affair between Father Kador and Sister Sephi, and was silenced before she could expose it. But the defense? They hit back with everything they had. The defense lawyers painted the case as a persecution of priests and nuns. They called the narco tests inconclusive. They accused the CBI of fabricating a narrative to appease the public. They asked, "Where is the murder weapon? Where is the eyewitness? Why wasn't a confession recorded under Section 164? They argued that Abhaya had mental pressure. That she may have taken her own life. That too much time had passed to fairly try anyone. But the prosecution stayed firm. Too much time had passed because powerful people made sure of it. Witnesses came and went. Many forgot. Some refused to speak. But slowly, over 100 days of hearings, a picture began to form, a dark, chilling portrait of what may have happened that night. The court reviewed 122 documents, heard from 49 witnesses, and cross-examined every shred of available truth. And then, on December 22, 2020, the moment everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. The verdict. The judge rose. The courtroom froze. Then came the words that echoed through 3 decades of sorrow. Guilty. Father Thomas Kador, found guilty of murder and destruction of evidence. Sister Sephi, also found guilty of murder. The court said. The crime was brutal. The conduct was calculated. The silence was engineered. The judge didn't stop there. Father Kotower was sentenced to 2 life terms, one for murder, one for destruction of evidence. Sister Sephi was sentenced to life imprisonment for murder. Justice had finally arrived. Outside the court, candles were lit. Sister Abhaya's name was finally spoken, not in whispers, but in triumph. Her family, now aged and weary, cried, not out of grief, but out of relief. She didn't jump. She didn't fall. They killed her, and they thought no one would care. The verdict made headlines across the country. 28 years. 3 investigating teams. Hundreds of hearings. And finally, justice. But the case had already left its scar. It exposed how powerful institutions can manipulate truth. How investigators can be stopped in their tracks. How religion, reputation, and silence can stand in the way of justice. It also showed the power of persistence. Activists, journalists, ex-CBI officers, and ordinary people refused to let this case die. They kept asking, kept digging, kept pushing, until the truth rose, just like Abhaya's body once did from that cold, dark well. Today, the St. Pius X convent continues to exist. The well has been sealed. But the ghost of Sister Abhaya still lingers. Not as a haunting spirit, but as a symbol. Of injustice. Of silence. Of courage. Abhaya never got to speak. But her death made others speak. And in doing so, she exposed a system that believed it was above the law. She was just 19. She didn't die in war. She didn't die of disease. She died because she saw something, and refused to pretend she didn't. In a world where silence is safer than truth, Sister Abhaya chose the latter. She didn't get a chance to fight for herself. But because others fought for her, her name will forever stand as a reminder. Even in the deepest well, truth will float. Even in the darkest night, justice can dawn. This was the story of Sister Abhaya. And this was the Crime Vault.